What if one short clip from a closed Team USA practice just exposed a truth Indiana Fever fans weren't ready to hear yet? Not a hot take, not a trade rumor, just a few minutes of raw basketball that quietly challenged everything people thought they knew about Caitlin Clark's future in Indiana. Because when that Day 2 training camp footage dropped, something felt different. Not louder, not flashier, just cleaner, faster in the ways that actually matter. Caitlin Clark and Jackie Young shared the floor, and almost immediately the game started making sense in a way that's been missing. No forced shots, no hesitation, no fighting for space, just instant recognition and flow. The kind you don't coach into players, the kind that either exists or it doesn't. And that's where the uncomfortable question creeps in. Not about talent, not about loyalty, but about fit. Because if this is what Caitlin looks like next to the right type of backcourt partner, what does that say about the current setup in Indiana? What does it mean when a few practice reps with a different guard suddenly unlock a version of the offense that feels inevitable instead of hopeful? This isn't one of those moments where you overreact to highlights or box scores. There was nothing flashy about it. No logo threes, no viral celebrations, just possessions stacking on top of each other with purpose. Passes made before defenders even realized they were late. Angles opening up without anyone forcing them. The kind of basketball that tells you something deeper is happening if you're willing to slow down and actually watch. And that's why this footage matters, because it didn't just show chemistry, it revealed clarity. It showed what Caitlin Clark looks like when the game is moving at her speed, not just fast, but intentional. When the person next to her understands tempo the same way she does, when decisions don't need to be explained, they just happen. So before anyone jumps to conclusions or starts naming villains, that's not what this is about. This is about the tape, about what the game itself is quietly saying when nobody's spinning narratives yet. Because once you see it, you can't unsee it, and the rest of the conversation flows naturally from there. But that was only the first signal, and once you break down what actually happened in that practice, the implications get a lot bigger, not just for Team USA, but for Indiana's entire future. Day 2 of Team USA training camp isn't supposed to feel like this. These practices are usually messy, experimental, full of lineups that exist for evaluation, not execution. Players are still learning tendencies, still figuring out spacing, still operating on instinct rather than rhythm. That's what made this footage stand out immediately. Because what Caitlin Clark and Jackie Young put on tape didn't look like two players feeling things out. It looked like two players who already knew the answers. From the first few possessions they shared, the pace was unmistakable. Not rushed, not reckless, just decisive. Caitlin gets the ball and doesn't hold it. Jackie fills the right lane without being told. The defense barely has time to organize before the advantage is already created. These weren't scripted actions or designed sets. This was read and react basketball at a level you usually only see from players who've logged hundreds of games together. And it matters who they were doing it against. This considerately wasn't a walkthrough or end-of-bench run. They were competing against elite talent, players who know how to disrupt timing, clog lanes, and punish hesitation. Yet the offense kept flowing. The ball moved faster than the defense. Decisions were made before pressure arrived. That's the difference between highlight basketball and winning basketball. One sequence in particular summed it up. A quick inbound, Caitlin doesn't survey, doesn't pause, doesn't wait for something to develop. She already sees it. Jackie takes off, catches in stride, and the defense is instantly behind the play. 2 dribbles later, it's over. No celebration, no reaction, just another possession handled exactly the way it should be. And that's the part people missed, how normal it looked, how easy it felt. That's when the conversation shifted. Because when chemistry shows up this quickly in a setting like this, it forces you to ask why. Not, is this exciting, but why does this work so cleanly? There's no honeymoon phase here, no adrenaline boost, just 2 high IQ players operating on the same wavelength, recognizing the same windows, valuing the same things. What made the footage so powerful wasn't that they scored, it was how they arrived at those shots. Early reads, correct spacing, trust without hesitation. Even when possessions didn't end in buckets, the process was perfect. The defense was constantly reacting instead of dictating. And in basketball, that's everything. This wasn't about one highlight or one run. It was about a pattern forming in real time. Every time Caitlin pushed, Jackie matched it. Every time Jackie attacked, Caitlin slid into the exact space needed to punish help defense. No wasted movement, no confusion about roles, just clarity.
And once you see that kind of clarity emerge in a matter of minutes, it reframes the entire discussion. Because this wasn't supposed to happen this fast. And when it does, it usually means something bigger is being revealed, something that goes far beyond one practice clip. Jackie Young stands out because she doesn't need the ball to announce her presence. She controls games without dominating them, and that distinction is everything when you're talking about fit next to a player like Caitlin Clark. This isn't about who can score more or who looks better on a highlight reel. It's about who makes the game easier for everyone else while still being a threat defenses can't ignore. At 6 feet tall, Jackie brings something most guards simply don't: size that actually translates. She can see over pressure, absorb contact, and still make the right read without rushing. But the real separator isn't physical, it's mental. Jackie understands timing in a way that doesn't show up in box scores. She knows when to accelerate and when to let the play breathe. That's tempo. And tempo is the language Caitlin Clark speaks fluently. Speed gets confused with tempo all the time. Speed is moving fast, tempo is moving with purpose. Jackie plays with the kind of controlled aggression that keeps everyone in sync. She doesn't outrun her teammates or force defenders into chaos just for the sake of chaos. She creates advantages, then waits for the defense to commit before delivering the punishment. That patience is rare, especially in guards who are also elite scorers. That's why the pairing looks so natural so quickly. Jackie doesn't need to prove anything on every touch. She doesn't hijack possessions. She fills gaps. She reads the floor. And when Caitlin pushes the ball, Jackie is already where she needs to be, cutting, spacing, or attacking downhill at the exact right moment. There's no overlap, no confusion about who's supposed to initiate. The roles define themselves. You could see it in how defenses reacted. When Jackie drove, help came early, not because she was hunting shots, but because she was collapsing the paint with intent. And when that help arrived, the ball didn't stick. It moved instantly to the open shooter, often Caitlin, often in rhythm. That's the kind of synergy defenses hate, because there's no obvious weakness to exploit. Jackie's ability to defend multiple positions only amplifies that fit. She takes pressure off Caitlin on the other end, allowing her to conserve energy for what she does best. Switches don't break the system. Matchups don't dictate the offense. Everything stays connected. And when the game speeds up, Jackie doesn't lose control. She tightens it. This is why the footage felt different. It wasn't two stars sharing the floor. It was two players solving the same problems in real time. One creating the advantage, the other finishing it or extending it, back and forth without ego, without hesitation, without wasted movement. And once you understand that, the next realization hits even harder. Because if this is what an ideal fit looks like, it forces you to look at the current situation through a very different lens. And that's where things start getting uncomfortable. This is the part of the conversation everyone tiptoes around, so let's be clear from the start. Kelsey Mitchell is not the problem. She never has been. She's been one of the few constants through some of the roughest years in Indiana, carrying offensive loads that would have broken most players. Her loyalty matters, her shot making matters, and her ability to score in isolation is elite by any standard. But basketball isn't just about stacking talent. It's about how skill sets overlap, and sometimes even great players can unintentionally cancel each other out. When Caitlin Clark and Kelsey Mitchell share the floor, the offense can explode in short bursts. There are moments of brilliance where everything clicks and the scoreboard moves fast, but there are also long stretches where the rhythm feels fragmented, not broken, just disjointed. Two players capable of creating their own shots, both comfortable operating with the ball, both naturally aggressive scorers. That overlap creates tension in spacing, decision-making, and tempo, even when neither player is doing anything wrong. Mitchell plays fast, really fast. Her game is built on speed, burst, and attacking gaps before defenses can react, and that skill is invaluable. But fast doesn't always align with Caitlin's strengths. Caitlin thrives when the game unfolds a half second ahead of the defense, not a step ahead of her teammates. She wants everyone moving in sync, making instant reads, punishing rotations as they happen. When possessions turn into individual races instead of collective movement, that advantage gets muted. You can feel it when watching Indiana's offense. Sometimes Caitlin creates an advantage, but the next action doesn't arrive in time. Other times, Mitchell breaks down a defender, but the spacing isn't set for the kickout. It's not a lack of effort or intelligence, it's a stylistic mismatch that shows up in the margins, the kind that doesn't scream at you but quietly limits the ceiling.
That's why the Team USA footage hits so differently. Because when Jackie Young slid into that space next to Caitlin, there was no friction, no overlap, no tug of war over tempo, just clean sequencing, one action naturally flowing into the next. The offense didn't feel like it was taking turns, it felt like it was operating as one system. And this is where emotions enter the conversation, because fans equate fit discussions with disrespect, but they're not the same thing. Acknowledging that another player might complement Caitlin better doesn't erase what Kelsey Mitchell has meant to the franchise. It doesn't diminish her talent. It simply recognizes that building around a generational player sometimes requires uncomfortable evaluations. The tape doesn't lie, but it also doesn't judge. It just shows what works, what flows, and what feels inevitable. And when you compare those two dynamics side by side, the difference isn't subtle, it's structural. And once you see that structural difference, the focus shifts. Because the real question isn't about loyalty or popularity, it's about how Caitlin Clark's game reaches its highest level and what kind of basketball actually gets her there. If there's one thing the practice footage makes impossible to ignore, it's this. Tempo is the engine of Caitlin Clark's game. Not speed, not volume, tempo. And once you understand that difference, everything you're seeing suddenly snaps into focus. There's a sequence where Caitlin grabs a defensive rebound and immediately pushes the ball up the floor. No hesitation, head up the entire time. She's scanning before she even crosses half court. One defender shades, another hesitates. That half second of uncertainty is all she needs. The ball moves, swing pass to the corner, open look. The shot doesn't fall, and that's the point. The possession was already won before the ball ever left the shooter's hands. That's what elite tempo looks like. It's not about how fast you run, it's about how fast you decide. Caitlin doesn't overwhelm defenses with raw athleticism. She overwhelms them with processing speed. She sees rotations forming before they fully commit, and she punishes them while they're still thinking. When she's surrounded by players who read the game at the same pace, the offense feels effortless. When she isn't, that advantage gets delayed or wasted. The footage shows possession after possession where the defense never gets comfortable. Not because the ball is being dribbled endlessly, but because it's moving with intention. One action forces a rotation. The next action attacks that rotation immediately. There's no reset, no stagnation, no bailout shots late in the clock. The pressure is constant and organized. This is where Jackie Young's presence becomes so important. She doesn't disrupt Caitlin's rhythm by pushing when it's not there. She doesn't slow things down unnecessarily either. She mirrors Caitlin's reads. When Caitlin accelerates, Jackie fills lanes. When Caitlin pauses, Jackie relocates or cuts. Every movement has a reason, and every reason compounds the advantage. You can see how different this looks from possessions built on isolation. Instead of one defender being beaten, the entire defense is being manipulated. Help comes early, closeouts are rushed, passing lanes open up naturally. Even when plays break down, the recovery options are already in place because everyone is thinking one step ahead. That's why missed shots don't tell the story here. The process does. The defense is reacting instead of dictating. And when a team lives in that space long enough, the results eventually become overwhelming. This kind of tempo isn't accidental. It's not something you turn on with effort alone. It's a shared understanding, a collective agreement on how the game should be played. And the more the footage rolls, the clearer it becomes. When Caitlin Clark is surrounded by players who share that understanding, her impact multiplies. And once you recognize how powerful that tempo is, the next question naturally follows. What happens when you add size, defense, and versatility into that same rhythm? That's where things start getting truly dangerous. One of the biggest things that quietly jumps off the screen in this footage has nothing to do with scoring at all. It's how much easier everything becomes on both ends of the floor when size and defensive versatility are built into the backcourt. Jackie Young changes the geometry of the game, and that impact shows up long before the box score ever does.
At 6 feet, Jackie doesn't defend like a typical guard. She doesn't get bumped off her spot. She doesn't panic when switched on to bigger players. She absorbs contact, stays balanced, and forces offenses to actually work for clean looks. That alone shifts matchups across the floor. It means fewer emergency rotations, fewer scrambling closeouts, less constant pressure on everyone else to cover mistakes. And that matters for Caitlin Clark more than most people realize. Caitlin has taken more criticism for her defense than almost any offensive star in recent memory, and a lot of it ignores context. She competes, she moves her feet, she rotates when she's supposed to. Is she an elite stopper? No, but she doesn't need to be. What she needs is a structure that doesn't expose her every possession. Jackie provides that structure. With Jackie on the floor, Caitlin doesn't have to guard up a position. She doesn't have to chase the most physical matchup through screens all night. She can stay engaged, play smart positional defense, and conserve energy for what actually wins games. That balance is everything when you're asking someone to be the engine of an offense. The footage shows this clearly. Defensive possessions don't look chaotic. Switches don't trigger panic. When pressure comes, it's absorbed, not amplified. Jackie can slide, recover, and still contest without fouling. That steadiness creates trust, and trust allows the entire defense to stay connected. And here's the part people overlook. Defense feeds tempo. When stops are clean, Caitlin gets the ball earlier. When rebounds are secured, transition opportunities multiply. When there's less breakdown on the perimeter, the offense isn't forced to operate against set defenses every trip. It all stacks together. Size also changes how defenses guard Caitlin on the other end. You can't just trap aggressively or switch recklessly when the secondary guard can punish mismatches, post smaller defenders, or attack closeouts with strength. Every choice becomes harder. Every mistake costs more. This isn't about hiding weaknesses. It's about amplifying strengths. When defense, size, and IQ are aligned, Caitlin's offensive value becomes even more overwhelming because the game tilts in her favor before the first pass is even made. And once you see how much stability that brings, it opens the door to another uncomfortable realization. The narratives around defense aren't always applied evenly, and that double standard is impossible to ignore once you know what to look for. Once you start paying attention to how Caitlin Clark is discussed, the double standard becomes hard to ignore, especially when you place her next to players who are evaluated very differently for the same exact things. Defense is the easiest example, and the Team USA footage puts that contrast under a microscope. Caitlin is constantly labeled as a liability. Every missed rotation gets magnified. Every bucket scored on her becomes evidence. But when you slow the tape down, what you actually see is effort, positioning, and awareness. She competes, she stays engaged, she makes the correct reads more often than she gets credit for. She's average defensively, which for a player providing her level of offensive impact is more than acceptable. What makes this conversation uncomfortable is that other elite guards live in that same defensive space and aren't scrutinized the same way. Take Paige Bueckers, for example. By most available metrics, Paige and Caitlin are nearly identical defenders at the professional level. Neither is locking people up. Neither is getting hunted relentlessly. Both rely on anticipation and positioning rather than raw lateral quickness. Both compete, yet only one of them gets framed as a problem. There's a play in the footage where Paige loses Jackie Young on a cut. It happens. Jackie gets an easy look off a Caitlin pass. No outrage, no think pieces, no questions about whether Paige can survive defensively at the highest level. It's just basketball, a normal possession that happens to everyone. When Caitlin gives up a similar look, it becomes a talking point. That difference doesn't come from the tape. It comes from narratives that were formed long before these players ever stepped into a WNBA gym together. Once a story takes hold, everything gets filtered through it. Caitlin's mistakes confirm the narrative. Paige's mistakes get contextualized or ignored. The irony is that the footage shows something else entirely. Both players are smart, both communicate, both rotate when needed, and when surrounded by the right personnel, neither one hurts the team. Defense is a 5-player responsibility, and when the system is sound, individual limitations get absorbed. This is why fit matters so much. Jackie Young doesn't just help Caitlin defensively, she helps neutralize the conversation. When the structure is solid, the microscope shifts. When possessions are clean, there's nothing to overanalyze. Winning has a way of silencing noise. And once you strip away the narratives and focus on what actually leads to winning basketball, the discussion changes completely. It stops being about who fits a storyline and starts being about who fits the system. And that's where this entire conversation is really headed. This is where it's important to slow the conversation down and separate what's possible from what's probable. Jackie Young is a core piece of the Las Vegas Aces. She's under contract, she's entrenched in a championship system. There's no report saying she's leaving, no indication that Indiana is making a move, and no reason to believe a reunion with Caitlin Clark is suddenly on the table. That part needs to be said clearly. But that doesn't make the footage irrelevant. In fact, it makes it more important. Because the real value of what we're seeing has less to do with Jackie Young specifically and everything to do with what she represents. This practice didn't create a trade rumor, it created a template. It showed in real time what the ideal version of a Caitlin Clark backcourt partnership actually looks like when all the pieces align. Team USA is experimenting, but Indiana doesn't have that luxury. They're building something permanent. And moments like this force front offices to ask uncomfortable questions. Not can we get this player, but why does this work so well and how do we replicate it? The answer isn't star power, it's profile. Size in the backcourt, defensive versatility, high basketball IQ, willingness to pass without hesitation, comfort playing both on and off the ball. A player who can create when needed, but doesn't need to dominate possessions to feel involved. That's the common thread, and Jackie just happens to embody it perfectly. For Team USA, this is about maximizing lineups in short bursts, finding combinations that overwhelm opponents quickly. Skill over tradition, fit over position labels, and the coaching staff clearly sees it. The lineups are fluid, the roles are flexible. The emphasis is on who plays well together, not who checks the most boxes on paper. For Indiana, the stakes are much higher. This isn't about experimenting in a closed gym. It's about building around a generational talent whose prime years will pass quickly if the foundation isn't right. The footage is a reminder that you don't just surround a star with good players and hope it works. You identify the specific traits that unlock her and build intentionally around them. That's the real takeaway. Jackie Young isn't the point, the fit is. And once you view the situation through that lens, it changes how you evaluate every roster decision moving forward, every contract, every draft pick, every lineup choice. Because now there's a clear example of what right looks like, and ignoring it would be a choice, not an accident. There's a mistake franchises make over and over again when they land a generational player. They assume greatness will smooth over everything else, that if you collect enough talent, the pieces will eventually figure it out. But history shows the opposite. The teams that win consistently aren't the ones with the most names, they're the ones with the cleanest vision. Building around a player like Caitlin Clark isn't about volume scoring or star power, it's about reducing friction. Every possession should make her job easier, not harder. Every lineup choice should amplify what she already does at an elite level, instead of forcing her to compensate for what others can't. The practice footage offers a clear blueprint. It starts with decision speed. Players around Caitlin have to process the game quickly, not just react, but anticipate. If a teammate needs an extra beat to recognize an advantage, that advantage is already gone. That's why basketball IQ matters more than raw athleticism in this system. Next is unselfishness, real unselfishness, not the kind that shows up in assist numbers. The willingness to move without the ball, to screen when you won't get it back, to make the simple pass early instead of the flashy one late. Caitlin's game thrives when everyone is committed to the same goal, creating the best shot, not the most impressive one. Size and versatility come right after that.
Not because small guards can't play, but because versatility gives you margin for error. It allows you to switch defensively without panic. It keeps opponents from hunting matchups. It prevents one weakness from becoming a nightly game plan. When lineups are flexible, systems hold. Spacing is another non-negotiable. Caitlin bends defenses the moment she crosses half court. That gravity only matters if teammates know how to use it. Standing still doesn't help. Cutting with purpose does. Relocating after passes does. Understanding when to lift, drift, or clear aside turns attention into advantage.
And finally, there's trust. The kind that can't be faked. Trust that the ball will come back if you make the right play. Trust that mistakes won't lead to hesitation. Trust that roles are defined by impact, not ego. That's when the offense stops feeling forced and starts feeling inevitable. This is why the footage resonated so deeply. It wasn't just good basketball, it was organized basketball, intentional basketball, the kind that reveals what a system could be if everyone is aligned around one central truth. Generational players don't need saving, they need structure. And when that structure is right, the ceiling isn't theoretical anymore, it's visible. This is where the conversation finally leaves the screen and lands with the people who care the most. Because once you've seen the footage, once you've broken down why it works, there's a question that naturally follows, and it has nothing to do with outrage or loyalty tests. If the perfect fit next to Caitlin Clark became available, would you be willing to make a hard decision? Not a dramatic one, not a disrespectful one, a strategic one. This isn't about tearing anyone down. It's about acknowledging that building a championship-level team requires constant evaluation, even when the players involved are beloved. Fans understand loyalty better than anyone, but they also understand winning, and those two things don't always move in the same direction. Kelsey Mitchell has given Indiana everything. That matters. But so does recognizing when a system could function at a higher level with a different skill profile next to its centerpiece. That's not cold. That's how elite organizations think. They separate appreciation from projection. The real question isn't who's better, it's who fits best, who makes the offense cleaner, who elevates the entire lineup instead of overlapping with it, who allows Caitlin to control games instead of having to force them. That's why this conversation resonates. Fans have felt the difference all season, even if they didn't have the language for it yet. The offense looks smoother in certain lineups. The ball pops more. The game feels less heavy. The footage just put a spotlight on something people were already sensing. And this isn't a hypothetical designed to stir drama. It's a necessary exercise for a franchise trying to maximize a generational talent. Because the worst mistake isn't making a bold move, it's avoiding one out of comfort. So this becomes bigger than one player or one practice. It becomes a referendum on direction, on whether the Fever are willing to build intentionally instead of emotionally, on whether they trust what the game is showing them. And the truth is, fans play a role in that. The conversation you're willing to have now shapes the decisions that get made later. The most important thing about that Day 2 footage isn't that it went viral, it's that it felt inevitable, like a glimpse of something that already existed, just waiting for the right conditions to reveal itself. No hype, no manufactured drama, just basketball quietly telling the truth. Great players have a way of doing that. When they're placed in the right environment, the game starts to look simpler instead of harder. Decisions come faster, spacing makes sense, pressure flips to the other side, and suddenly you're no longer debating potential, you're watching it materialize. That's what Caitlin Clark next to the right pieces looks like. Not forced brilliance, not constant rescue missions, just control. The kind that doesn't demand attention, but commands it anyway. And once you've seen that version, it becomes impossible to pretend it doesn't exist. The footage wasn't a promise, it was a warning, a reminder that generational talent doesn't wait forever for alignment. Windows open and close quietly, and the teams that capitalize on them are usually the ones paying attention when everyone else is still arguing narratives.
Indiana doesn't need to chase headlines, it needs to chase clarity. The blueprint is there. The question is whether they're willing to follow it, even when it leads to uncomfortable conversations. Because championship basketball rarely announces itself loudly at first. Sometimes it shows up in a closed practice gym on a random day with no audience, and only the people willing to look closely realize what they're seeing. The rest of the league is always watching. The only question left is whether Indiana is.